at the tomb. The next section I'm going to be doing is in John, but before that, as I was studying the 20th chapter of John, the resurrection, I saw that there's so many other parts of this story that are missing in John, and to just do John by itself would be okay, which I'm going to do. But before I do that, thought, I'm going to put all these together, all the Gospels, the stories, and try to see if I can fit the whole thing together. Well, it's quite a challenge, but basically what I have below is what I had. And this is just at the tomb. This is not going back with the disciples and Peter running and John, but just before that all happens, just with the women basically are the only ones involved, except Jesus and these heavenly beings. Now, what are these heavenly beings? It says in Matthew 28:2, and behold, a great earthquake took place. For an angel of the Lord, having come down from out of heaven, having come forward, rolled the stone from the door, and was sitting down upon it. And his shape was as lightning, and his garment white as snow. So here's this angel sitting there, and the soldiers now see him, and it says, and from the fear of him, the ones keeping guard shook, and became as dead ones. Now, this was right before the women arrive, because they are going to go in and report this, and while they're going in, the women arrive. And then in 5, and having responded, the angel said to the women. Now, see, it breaks there in a strange way, because it doesn't say about them speaking to the women as such, except the very beginning. But Mary Magdalene and the other Mary of James. But the angel said to the women, you fear not, I have known that you seek Jesus, the one having been crucified. He's not here, for he was raised from the dead. Now, in Mark 16:5, it says that having entered into the tomb, they saw a young man sitting down on the right, having been clothed in white apparel, and they were astonished. So now, this could be the same being, except flashing lightning. He calmed down, and he's just sitting there in white apparel. But then they knew he was not normal. And then in Luke 24:4, it says, and it came to pass, in their being perplexed on account of this, that behold, 2 men stood by them in attire flashing lightning. So this is a different story on 24:4. As we find out, there are, I believe, 3 groups of women, 2 separate, completely separate, different ones, and then one that was we'll get to that in a few verses down here. And then in John 20:11, it says, and then she wept, that is Mary Magdalene, she leaned over into the sepulchre, and she views 2 angels in white, being seated, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been laid. So they are on the left side, because it says here the young man was sitting on the right, and they were astonished. So, and we're going to go through the resurrection, starting right after the soldiers flee, and then Jesus appears later. And day 1, Jesus first he died around 3 p.m., because it says that darkness was on the ground from the 3rd to the 6th hour, which Hebrew time would be 12 to 3. So if that was the case, then he was there on the cross, dead afterwards, and then at dusk, the few hours later, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus come, take the body, bring it down off the cross, as I mentioned in the last video, and put it inside of the tomb, roll a stone. And Mary, it says right here, and was there Mary the Magdalene, and the other Mary being seated before the tomb. So the other Mary was probably the Mary of James and Salome. In Luke 23:55, but it says, but having followed closely after also were women, the ones who were having gathered together to him from out of Galilee. So this is a separate group than Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. These are women from Galilee. There's no place where it mentions Mary Magdalene being from Galilee. Basically, the first place she appears is in Judea when Jesus is down into Judea, and other women were with her. They were all healed, demons being cast out, and then they supported Jesus, went and followed him down into Jerusalem. So that's these other women. And now on day 2, it was preparation day with Sabbath coming on. Now the Sabbath is a difficult thing to follow because a Sabbath is more of an action rather than any certain time. It can be a certain time, but it means you don't work, you do these things on the Sabbath, or you don't do the things that are prohibited on the Sabbath. And the Sabbath normally is on a Saturday, but if it's on a holiday feast, then the high Sabbath can be the first day of the holiday feast, and so forth. You can study the Sabbath, and people have, trying to figure it all out, exactly which day, if he died on Thursday or Friday. And I'm not going to go into all that because it's very, very difficult to come up with any conclusion. But he was in the ground for 3 days. But we'll see what it says. And day 2, and it was preparation day with Sabbath coming on. The Passover could have been on a Friday, and then the next day would have been Saturday, and that would be the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and that could have been the high Sabbath. Some people think that's what it was. So the Sabbath coming on would be the second day after he died. Then it says, now the next day, which is after the preparation, were gathered together the chief priests and the Pharisees to Pilate. So during this period of time, Jesus is dead, but they say to Pilate, saying, "O Master, we remember that deluded one said, while still living, 'After 3 days I arise.' Bid then to safeguard the tomb until the 3rd day, lest at any time his disciples, having come at night, should steal it, and should say to the people, 'He's risen from the dead ones,' and will be the last delusion worse than the first." And Pilate said to them, "Go away. You safeguard as you have known." Then the ones having gone safeguarded the tomb, having set seal upon the stone by the custodial guard, not the Roman soldiers. These are custodial guards, come from the high priest. Luke 23:5, it says, "And on the Sabbath they were tranquil." That is the women from Galilee. And then day 3, 28:11 of Matthew, "And of their having gone, behold, some of the custodial guard having come into the city reported to the chief priests all the things having happened." Seeing the angel and being afraid and falling down, and they go in and tell what happened. Then when they wake up, the stone's gone, rolled away, and nobody's inside of the tomb. "And having gathered together with the elders and council having taken place, they gave the soldiers enough silver, saying, 'Say that his disciples having come by night stole him, of us being asleep.'" So this would have been right after Jesus is now out of the tomb, and the women are all going towards the tomb, and these soldiers are all leaving the tomb and going into the town. So now the next day, day 1 of the Sabbath, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the one of James and Salome. So these 2 women. Now I mention this because Jesus saw her first. In 28:1 of Matthew, "And late of Sabbaths, in the dawn of day 1 of Sabbaths, came Mary the Magdalene and the other Mary to view the tomb." See where it's at? See what's going on? That's Mary, the mother, Mary of James. And then Mark 16:1 says, "And the elapsing of the Sabbath, Mary the Magdalene and Mary the one of James and Salome brought aromatics, that having come they should anoint him. And exceedingly in the morning of day 1 of Sabbath they come unto the tomb at the rising of the sun. And they said among themselves, Well, who will roll away the stone for us from out of the door of the tomb? And having looked up, they viewed that the stone had been rolled away, for it was exceedingly great. And then in Luke 2:24-2, it says, and they found the stone having been rolled away from the sepulchre. And John 20, verse 1, Mary Magdalene, she sees the stone having been lifted from the sepulchre. So now the stone's gone, and the women are all they're looking in. In Mark 16:5, and having entered into the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right. He's on the right. And so across from him is this platform where they put Jesus' body, where later we'll see the two angels at the top and the head and the feet. And having been clothed in white apparel, and they were astonished. The women were. And then he says to them, do not be astonished. You seek Jesus the Nazarene, the one having been crucified. He was raised. He's not here. See the place where they put him? They point over there. But go, say to his disciples and to Peter that he goes before you into Galilee. There you will see him as he said to you. Now this could have been the same angel. The young man could be the angel that rolled away the stone. In Mark 16:8, and having come forth quickly, they fled from the tomb, for trembling and a change of state took hold of them, and they told no one, not one thing, for they were afraid. So they both leave. And then Mark 16, and having risen in the morning on the first day of Sabbath, he appeared first to Mary the Magdalene, from of which he had cast out 7 demons. Now that story goes into John 20, verse 11. But Mary stood at the sepulchre weeping outside. So as she weeps, now this angel telling her doesn't know where Jesus is, because the angel says this is where he was. She weeps, and she leaned over into the sepulchre again, and she views 2 angels in white, being seated, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus has been laid. And those ones say to her, woman, why do you weep? She says to them, for they took my Lord, and I know not where they placed him. And these things having said, she turns to the rear and views Jesus having stood, and did not know that it is Jesus. So she's outside looking inside, and these angels are talking to her. And then all of a sudden she sees this man who doesn't recognize him. And Jesus says to her, oh woman, why do you weep? Who do you seek? And that one, thinking that he is the gardener, says to him, oh master, if you bore him, tell me where you put him, and I'll take him. And Jesus says to her, Mary. And turning, that one says to him, Rabboni, which is to say, teacher. He's alive. And Jesus says to her, do not touch me, for not yet have I ascended to my Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I ascend to my Father and your Father, and my God and your God. So Jesus now sees Mary, and then Mary Magdalene comes reporting to the disciples that she has seen the Lord, and these things he said to her. Now, there could have been other women coming there. It says here in Matthew 28:5, and having responded, the angel said to the women, well, you fear not, for I have known that you seek Jesus, the one having been crucified. He is not here, for he was raised, as he said. Come, behold the place where the Lord was situated. And quickly, having gone, say to his disciples that he is risen from dead ones. And behold, he goes before you into Galilee. There you'll see him. Now, behold, I've told it to you, just as God told the angel to say. And 28:8, and having gone forth quickly from the sepulchre with fear and great joy, they ran to report to his disciples. And Matthew 16:8 says they flee, trembling, and a change of state. In verse 28:9, but as they were going to report to his disciples, that behold, Jesus met them, saying, hail. Now, I don't believe that Mary was with them. This could possibly be later going into the women from Galilee who were also there. So all these women, and they having come forward, held his feet and did obeisance to him. So this, I don't believe, Mary was there, because Mary had already first saw Jesus, and she's gone, tell the disciples, and then these women came, I believe, and then they did obeisance to him. And then in verse 10 it says, then Jesus says to them, fear not, go report to my brothers that they should go forth into Galilee, and there they will see me, as Mary said. Then back in Mark 16:10, and that one having gone, reported to the ones having become with him who were mourning and weeping. Now that one here could be Mary, probably. In Luke 24:9, and having returned from the sepulchre, they reported all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. And here we've got they, and here that one. So it's like a couple of different stories of things going on here. Now, I've seen over the history that they conflate the whole thing. Everybody, it's hard to separate this thing into something that makes sense. Most people, most readings of this period of time, it's just saying that, Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days and he rose up, and then these women, and then they kind of make it all together and not separated in any way like this. Now, this can be also seen in the Apostolic Bible in the Greek if you want to study it even further. Luke 24:10, it says, and they were the Magdalene, Mary and Joanna, and Mary the mother of James, and the rest with them who spoke to the apostles these things. So the rest with them. So this could be these women from Galilee here, the ones that held on to his feet. Doesn't really differentiate it, but the women from Galilee now are a different group. It says in Luke 24:1, and day one of the Sabbath at deep dawn, they came unto the tomb, bringing aromatics which they prepared, and some others with them. So now who these others were, we don't know, but there's a lot of these women. And they found the stone having been rolled away from the sepulchre. So now I think Mary is gone, and these other ones that held his feet are gone. And having entered, they found not the body of the Lord Jesus. It came to pass, in their being perplexed on account of this, that behold, 2 men stood by them in attire, flashing lightning. Woo. And of their having become thrown into fear, and leaning the face unto the ground, the 2 men said to the women, why do you seek the living with the dead ones? He's not here, but arisen. Remember, as he spoke to you, still being in Galilee. So here they're the women from Galilee. It has nothing to do with Mary. In verse 7, and so he was saying that it is necessary the Son of Man to be delivered up into the hands of sinful men, and to be crucified, and on the 3rd day to rise up. And they remembered his sayings, and then they apparently go and tell the disciples. So that's the best I could see in putting this all together. Now next is the story that has Peter and John going, and then the disciples that are back in Jerusalem, and a few other disciples on a road to Emmaus, and all of these things happen fairly soon afterwards. And we're going to be going through that. Next, maybe I'll put together something like this, an overview of it, and then we'll go into chapter 20, the resurrection, chapter 20 of John.